We are here in Las Vegas. We're covering Freedom Fest, and this is John Fund, of course. John Fund from National Review, pretty much every political talk show on earth. Yeah, I mean, you're all over the place. Good to see you, John. First of all, hold up your new book, Obama's Enforcer, Eric Holder's Justice Department. John Fund, Hans von Spakovsky, also a friend of ours on Earning News. Yes. You guys have written books in the past. We talk a lot, of course, about Eric Holder and Obama. What is this book about?
It is about the fact that we have an attorney general who at every fork in the road where he has a choice between following the president's wishes and politicizing the Department of Justice and bending it to the president's will and following the rule of law and the Constitution, he chooses the president's priorities. And that's very dangerous. We quote a senior Justice Department official who's a career official who says, "This is the most politicized Justice Department since John Mitchell worked for Richard Nixon."
You know, when you guys say stuff like that, or J. Christian Adams talks about what he talks about in his experience with the Justice Department, everyone talks, you guys are nuts, it's all conspiracy theorists.
You don't have to believe me. Believe the Supreme Court. In the last 2 years alone, the Supreme Court has 13 times voted unanimously, 9-zip, against the Obama administration's position on constitutional issues, including their incredible overreach in executive power. When your own appointees, Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, and Kagan was even his appointee of the Justice Department, when they vote against you, you got a problem. It's not we who have a problem, it's the American people who have a problem with Eric Holder, and the Supreme Court has a problem with Eric Holder.
We've been talking about Fast and Furious since it started. There's very few outlets, unfortunately, that devoted a lot of time to this story, which is it's still developing as we speak.
And we're going to learn more soon. I think the judge eventually is going to force the documents that Eric Holder has been covering up out into the light of day. Transparency is the great enemy of Obama. Ironically, since he campaigned on transparency in 2008, but he now wants to hide documents from us. These documents being covered up, led to the House of Representatives voting to conduct a contempt citation against Eric Holder for the first time in history. And 1 out of 8 Democrats in the House of Representatives voted to hold Eric Holder in contempt. This is bipartisan. Just as the Supreme Court is coming around to the view that Obama has overstepped his authority, so too are some Democrats in Congress.
You talk about documents that were hidden. We're now finding out we're in the middle of the Lois Lerner scandal. The emails are coming out. More and more evidence and proof that she's targeted Tea Parties and conservative organizations. And covered up, of course. The cover-ups, the lies, the hiding, the transparency. 38 professional journalist organizations said, President Obama and White House, stop stonewalling us. We're just trying to do our jobs. At what point did the American people, we know, and we've been...
The answer is November.
Seriously, is that all there is to it?
Well, it's the most direct action people can take. If people contact their friends, relatives, and neighbors and tell them it's important to vote, they are much more likely to vote. We each have much more influence around our circle of friends than we realize. If we tell people it's important to vote and why it's important to vote, I think we can have a material impact on the Senate races. If the Senate were to go against Obama next year, I believe that the power of the purse that Congress has would force the Justice Department to reorder its priorities, because if they didn't, they would be in danger of having their funding adjusted by Congress.
John, and you're in the middle of this game in Washington too, when we talk about what's going on in the Republican Party, whether it's the rhinos or the Tea Partiers or the squishy ones or the nut job ones, and there's so many factions and coalitions of Republicans that don't seem to ever get along, and it makes you kind of worry about what's going to happen. Can all these different and just totally disparate factions get together and make things happen and work together in 2014 and 16?
Well, a lot of this is an inside the Beltway phenomenon. I don't see the establishment of the Tea Party fighting quite as viciously out in the States. I think a lot of it is the consultant class. Right. I call it the staff infection. The staff infection is very concerned that their iron rice bowl is being broken up, and they've had all of these valuable contracts from the party, and they don't want to see their guys lose. We saw how viciously they fought in Mississippi. The voters have the ultimate say still, and that's the key. So I think that we have to hold our representatives to account. I will say this, despite all the civil war, the ideological center of the Republican Party has moved far more in the Tea Party direction in the last couple of years. It really has. I mean, there are fewer and fewer rhinos.
Right.
And they're becoming an endangered species, I might even say.
Yes.
So I think that is what we have to keep pressing and ignore the fact that the mainstream media hurls names and smears the Tea Party. You know what? They're doing that if they think you're a danger, not if they think you're impotent.
Go to the other side real quick. When we look at the heir apparent, it seemed for Hillary Clinton, it was all hers for 2016.
So it was in 2008.
Agreed. But the book Hard Choices has been a disaster. Simon Schuster is not very happy at all. Is that too anecdotal to think that maybe she's
Hard Choices made soft sales. Yes.
Is that too anecdotal to think that maybe she's not as all powerful and the heir apparent that the other side thinks
Look,
she is?
I don't think any one anecdote or incident dictates that. I do think that you have to understand that she is old news, and everybody.
Is she really? I mean, she dominates the press cycles when she wants to.
That's what old news does.
Touche, sir.
Okay, but old news can become stale news.
Yes.
And if somebody exciting were to come along, like an Elizabeth Warren, I think the media would go, "Oh, something new to cover." And someone like Barack Obama surprised her in 2008. So is she the front runner? Yes. But she's only the front runner as long as she isn't, and as long as she doesn't have a credible opponent that people can compare and contrast to.
You have your book with Hans about Eric Holder. You've also written extensively, you and Hans, about voter fraud. It's
Yes.
been a big issue for you. The other side claims there's no such thing. Vox.com will tell you there's no such thing. It's ridiculous.
Well, it's interesting because in Texas, we have a Texas state representative, a Democrat, who's following a very successful lawsuit based on the Texas Democratic primary. She just lost by a few votes, in which she's uncovered enormous documented evidence of voter fraud. It seems when it happens in Democratic primaries, there is voter fraud. It's just when there's a Democrat and a Republican, they can't seem to find any voter fraud. So I think their inability to find it is, shall we say, highly selective on a partisan basis.
When you talk about your last two books and the commonality being how much True the Vote, which is a group
Yes.
that wants
Houston, Texas,
wants to ferret out voter fraud, they're the ones who are getting
They were
attacked.
the ones who were most stopped and most harassed by the IRS.
Now, what does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that voter fraud is a serious issue, and there are some people in this country who just don't want the rest of us to see what goes on behind the curtain.
Fair point. When you look at the border, John, it is an absolute disaster. You talked about Democrats and Republicans and a bipartisan anger about things. You have even Democrats saying, "You got to go to the border, Mr. President." He's not going. He's going for fundraisers.
But he's only refusing to go to the border because he doesn't like photo ops.
Oh, yeah, and we know that
he never does photo ops.
President Selfie hates those.
I mean, there was a photo op the night before with him shooting pool and drinking a beer. But that wasn't a photo op. That was an educational opportunity.
Of course. How bad is this border crisis going to affect him in his remaining years?
Chaos never helps an incumbent president, because chaos means there's disorder. If you're president, you're supposed to keep order.
Yeah, well, that went out the window a long time ago.
I think Obama's refusal to go to the border is worse than what President Bush did in Katrina. He at least flew over New Orleans. And he had an excuse for not landing because everything was flooded.
Right.
But Obama has no excuse other than the fact that he can't stand this issue. He can't stand to actually meet the people at the border who would tell him very pointedly that he's not doing what they want him to do to secure the border. And in addition, the President of the United States has abdicated his responsibility to actually carry out the law. If he were to go to the border, all of that would come into sharp focus. So I understand why he doesn't want to go to the border. Why does Bologna reject the grinder?
You've been in D.C. for a long time,
Sure.
and you know the game. When people watching and listening, your average viewer and listener out there in America is watching this and sees what's going on in Washington, the dysfunction, the absolute gridlock. Do you think people think that they can have a voice, or do you think they're voiceless and they give up on this stuff?
What the people who control Washington, D.C. want is they want a passive political response from the average person. They don't want them to vote. They don't want them to have hope. They don't want them to get involved. What we saw in 2010, an organized, aggressive electorate can change Washington. Not as much as it should be, but they still changed it. In 2012, the Obama people came back and they, out-organized us. But we can out-organize them in 2014 and probably in 2016 because Obama will not be able to transfer his incredible vote-getting ability in the minority communities to another candidate. It's simply not possible. So I think you can change Washington. The last thing you want to do is to be passive and defeatist and stay home.
Another thing that's causing a little internecine warfare in the Republican Party is the issue of amnesty. If you had a magic wand to fix this and solve it, what would you do about amnesty and the whole issue of the crisis on the border right now?
Well, my brother was deputy chief of police in Tucson for many years. He was the chief liaison with the Border Patrol. If you talk to the Border Patrol people off the record, they will tell you the bad news is enforcement only can't work. You know, we've had enforcement only on the war on drugs at the border for 45 years. How's that worked out for us? You cannot keep everything out through enforcement alone. We also, of course, shouldn't have amnesty. And by the way, most people in this country don't want amnesty because only 36% of the 6 million Hispanics who are in this country legally have taken out citizenship. In other words, they're eligible for citizenship, but only 36% have. That's not their major priority. Their major priority is being able to travel back and forth without harassment at the border, being able to come out into the open, and they want security and stability. We had that in the 50s and 60s under the Eisenhower-Bracero program, which was a work visa program. You come, you work, you can go back. You come, you work, and you can go back. And if you commit a crime, you definitely can't come back. We took the arrests at the border from 1 million in 1953 down to 45,000 by 1959. We had a program of, if you hire illegal aliens, we're going to bust you, and we're going to put your name on the front page of the paper if you're an employer. But if you hire legal aliens, work visa aliens, we're going to have a program that actually allows you to do that and gives you the workers you need.
Thanks for your time. Good luck with the book, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Pleasure, Cameron. Thank you.